For 24/7 FDV counselling and support, you can contact 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732. LGBTIQA+ specialist FDV support is also available through the Rainbow Sexual Domestic and Family Violence Helpline on 1-800-497-212. In Western Australia, you can contact the Pride and Respect Specialist FDV Support Service on 0481 080 201. Support links are included in the show notes.
Welcome to the Pride and Respect podcast, where we discuss the difficult topic of family, domestic, sexual and intimate partner violence within the LGBTIQA+ community. Each episode, we bring you genuine stories of lived experience and share empowering insights and advice from sector specialists. I'm your host, Dr Jack Farrugia, a researcher in the Youth Mental Health team at the Kids Research Institute Australia. I bring both research expertise and lived experience as somebody who is LGBTIQA+ and who has previously experienced intimate partner violence. Thank you for joining us today. In today's episode, we discuss the experiences of older LGBTI people and how structural issues like criminalisation and homophobia create vulnerabilities to family, domestic, sexual and intimate partner violence and elder abuse across the lifespan. With us today, we have Kedy Krystal. Kedy has worked in the field of domestic and family violence from 1983 to 2016. Currently, she is the Executive Officer for GLBTI Rights in Ageing, a non-for-profit community-based organisation working to ensure that older LGBTI people are safe and respected. Thanks for joining us today, Kedy.
Hi, Jack.
And we also have Paul. So Paul is a member of the community who has lived experience with abuse and is keen to share his stories with us today. Thanks for joining us today, Paul.
Thanks, Jack.
So to start off the conversation, I'm just keen to know a bit about from either of you why you were both keen to take part in the campaign and the podcast today. Kedy, would you like to go first?
This is an issue that's been a huge part of my life for a very long time. I've worked in the area of domestic and family violence, and over those years I saw many LGBTI people reach out for help when they had experienced intimate partner violence or family violence, and there were very few services available, and there was an incredible lack of understanding in our community that violence was occurring in our relationships and our intimate relationships. Mm-hmm. I think we as a community were too scared to talk about this issue because we were already surrounded by bigots and people who were more than willing to criticise us and our sexuality and our gender identities, that talking about the fact that sometimes the way that we treated each other was not the best way to be treating each other in our relationships.
Yep.
So it's always been a passion of mine. In the last few years since I've started working with Grey and started to understand a lot more about the aged care system and started to see how that system forces our older members of our community back into the closet because of the way that we are still not recognised and included in aged care by aged care providers as legitimate and valued and important people in our own right.
You know, that touches on, I guess, one of the main purposes of this campaign, right, is to have these conversations and have these real conversations about how, you know, these experiences are unique for older LGBTI people. And, you know, whenever I get the chance to speak to you about things like this, I really enjoy it, enjoy in, the most appropriate sense. So yeah, thank you for being here today. Keen to get more into the conversation.
Okay, thanks, Jack.
And Paul, keen to hear about why you're keen to be involved today.
Well, so because of the way I chose to internalise things from a very early age and hide basically how I was being affected, I accumulated quite a bit of baggage over the years, which culminated in a mental health journey, which put me in a car living on the street. I seem to be a magnet for the people who want to abuse you. Not so much anymore because my perspective's changed. But yeah, I've wanted to become part of this because it's important. If anybody could possibly benefit from what I'm trying to tell you, I've won, okay? Even if it's just one person, okay?
And throughout, this series, we've been speaking a lot about the unique ways that LGBTI people do experience family, domestic, sexual, intimate partner violence, but we also do know that the experiences of older members of our community are even more unique and can sort of manifest in different ways. So, Kedy, I'd be keen to get some of your perspectives on that, and maybe sort of for our listeners or viewers who are maybe unaware about what elder abuse is, would you mind giving us a quick summary on that?
The textbook definition of elder abuse is abuse that starts when a person is occurring when a person is 65 plus.
Yeah.
So it's a random age, I think, just tied to when we all retire. The retirement age used to be 65. So if you're living in a relationship, you've been living, with your partner for 30 years, and that relationship's been abusive, we would call that a domestic violence relationship or an intimate partner violence relationship. Technically, when you turn 65 and they're still being abusive to you, you're now what's called in an elder abuse situation. It's a very random, different cut-off point. But elder abuse in itself covers a whole range of abuses. The types of behaviour that we see in intimate partner violence, so physical, sexual violence, financial abuse. Financial abuse is a huge part of elder abuse, particularly when we're looking at heterosexual relationships, but also within our relationships. But also we all would label under elder abuse the sort of abuse that biological family members enact on an older person. That may be an older person who's come out as a gay man or a lesbian later in life, and biological family might be adult children or other members of the family who then become abusive, who then reject that family member because of their sexuality at that point. What we also see under that label is biological family members rejecting people who have transitioned late in life. So trans women, trans men who are at a vulnerable time in their life and have transitioned, then being cut off from adult children, from grandchildren, from other members of their family because of that choice they've made at that point in their life. In addition to that, under elder abuse, we would also see abuse that an older person might be experiencing from a paid carer coming in to clean their house, who then might steal from them, might be verbally abusive to them, might be, rough when they handle them in the shower, all that sort of level of abuse. And then on top of that, we would also say that there's abuse that occurs within institutional abuse, going into an aged care facility where your partner can't come and stay overnight with you or can't kiss you goodbye because of the response that they may get as a couple from other members of the other residents.
Yeah.
The way staff might treat you if they know what your sexuality is. For trans people and people born with an intersex variation, they have no way of going back to the closet, so their experience of abuse might be even more extreme than it may be for a gay man or a lesbian at that time. So there's a whole lot of abuse that might occur. One of the other things we hear often is that when an older LGBTI person has died, that within a family funeral ceremony, their sexuality can be completely disregarded and hidden, and their chosen family and other people that are important to them, and often even a partner, may be completely ignored within a funeral.
Or excluded
In a funeral ceremony by biological family members. We would say that all of that comes under the label of elder abuse.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing all that. And I think so many of those examples people don't recognise as being family, domestic, sexual, intimate partner violence, let alone elder abuse as well. And so that's where we need to remember that's what that looks like, and not forget it when we are looking at how to sort of change people's responses to it, whether it be family members or service providers, general community. We just need to remember that. I
think one of the hardest things to see is when a person transitions late in life, when a person makes that decision because they recognise they've spent their life not being their true self, and then to have biological family members and close friends walk away from them at that point as they're going into a particularly vulnerable part of not only transitioning but just generally growing older and becoming more vulnerable and needing more support.
And that's a psychological violence, right?
Absolutely.
It absolutely shatters you. Because when I eventually came out at 28, I lost all of my friends.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
My family stopped talking to me. I just, you are alone.
Yes.
And so you have to stand alone.
Yeah.
I know that, sharing, our experiences and stories can be quite tough at times, but I think that's it's for those who are able to do it. It's important, as you said, to sort of hopefully empower and make someone who might be going through a similar thing feel seen and that they're not alone.
Yeah. Shed some light in the dark corners.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here and being keen to share your stories with us. Look, and I know that many older LGBTI people have come of age when, throughout history, when, our identities were criminalized and looked down upon. And I know stigma is still incredibly prevalent today. It's not necessarily like it was, but it still isn't great, but it was certainly not great back then as well. So I'm keen to hear a bit more from yourself, Paul, anything you'd like to share with us. When you think back to your early, life, particularly being in abusive relationships, what it was like experiencing that as a gay man in Australia at that time.
It's an unfortunate fact of life that I am very identifiable, okay, within a group of people that, here's one, right? So, and my family didn't know how to deal with that. And we were part of a religious organisation. So shunning was definitely a thing, being cut from the herd. These things impact you as time moves on. So, but more so, it taught me to hide who I was. So I can actually pass for a while. And people sort of start asking questions and, eventually they work it out. But it forces you to hide. Yeah. And one of the greatest, most damaging things that you could possibly do to yourself is not to be true to who you are.
Something that stood out to me when we were having a chat, in preparation for this podcast today, is you said that your voice was taken away. And to me, that was such a powerful way to sort of capture the ways in which, people who experience family, domestic, sexual, intimate partner violence, what they go through, but particularly for, our LGBTI community and, throughout history, and not just today, but sort of back then as well.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because taking your voice away is part of the child that was never allowed to be a child. Okay, don't fidget, don't laugh, don't make so much noise, don't. And being the eldest of my siblings, you learn to shut up, just let it go. Right? But you don't, because you're actually just internalising it. You put it in a box and you shut the lid down, and there it sits. And eventually you've got so much accumulated angst in there, it starts bleeding out into your everyday life. And then you start looking petty or vengeful or, which isn't who I am. But it was just a function of how I had chosen to deal with it.
And something that we spoke about in the first episode around sort of breaking the silence, of what these experiences are like for our community is these sort of social determinants, structural issues that can occur from an early age for LGBTI people, sort of all that stigma, homophobia, all of that discrimination that as you sort of grow up and experience these really hard things like family, domestic, sexual, intimate partner violence, it's already hard to speak about. But when you've got all these extra sort of barriers and sort of baggage onto you, it's harder to do that. Kedy, I was wondering if you had any insights into that and sort of what it might have been like, throughout history for our community to go through this and actually feel like they can't talk about it.
Well, I think For an older person, looking back on a lifespan, so for here in WA, gay men were criminalised up to 1990 for having sex. For me, that's not very long ago, 1990. And when the legislation changed at that point, it changed so that it allowed gay men who were 21 and over to have sex. But at the same time, heterosexual people at 16 were able to have sex. So that even though there was an initial change in legislation, there still was a discrimination between us and heterosexual people. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't until 2002 that we became equalised under the law in terms of sexual activity. The other part of that, I guess, to look at is that lesbians were never criminalised. Mm-hmm. So it was only gay men whose sexual activities were criminalised. What the experience for many older gay men now is that they actually lived a life where many of them had a criminal record. Mm-hmm. For a very simple thing of having sex with another man. But that criminal record then went on to impact what sort of jobs they could have throughout their life, how they could, who they could tell about their past. And that then, in fact, impacted how much money they might earn over their lifespan, whether they could get jobs in their profession. So all of those things have a cumulative negative effect on people and force them to remain silent about things in their life. Even through those changes in legislation, there still is discrimination. We still live today in a society that discriminates us again in many, many ways. Mm-hmm. I was a primary school teacher. I lost a job in the early 1980s because I was an out lesbian. That was perfectly legal for my employer to sack me. It was perfectly legal at that time to evict someone from their home. Mm-hmm. It was perfectly legal for biological family to, force their child out onto the streets, and that still happens, particularly for our trans community today.
Yeah.
So lesbian mothers in that time in the 80s, up until 1984, the family court was still ruling against those women and saying they were unfit to be a mother purely because they were a lesbian.
Yeah.
So that shaped people's lives and the decisions they made to either stay in marriages that potentially may or may not have been violent. Mine particularly was. Not to leave, or to leave and risk losing their children. Mm. These things we bring into our old age with us, and then the decisions we make now as an older person are shaped by those fears. Then I'm not going to tell the doctor about this part of my life. I'm not going to tell my aged care provider about the fact that I've got adult children who I wasn't able to parent for many years. All of those things continue to shape us. And those vulnerabilities then make us more vulnerable to someone who might choose to be abusive to us.
Yeah. It's insidious, actually. It quietly puts you in the closet, and it quietly just starts to change. It modifies how you look for help, for example. So if you are in too deep, the shame.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the other important part of it about why our community finds it so hard to talk about this, and why a person who's being abused, no matter what age they are, is that internalised shame that we take on as ours and blame. This is happening to me because I am a gay man or a lesbian or a trans person. This is my fault. It makes it incredibly hard to reach out for help when you have that mindset. And we have to stop. We have to also, the other thing I think we tend to do is that we tend to allow the abuser a great deal of leeway into why they're behaving that way as well. That stops us also reaching out for help. And then when we layer that with maybe drugs and alcohol use, other things, it becomes very easy to excuse their behaviour and not seek help ourselves. That's outside of the fact that the services don't basically know how to respond to us, even if we do reach out.
Yeah.
Just a human being.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. It's such a systemic thing, right? And I think that a lot of those system issues are completely unrecognised and go invisible for our community, but particularly for older LGBTI people, where, if the providers who maybe we're looking for help from when we experience things like this aren't really necessarily that capable of supporting, LGBTI people and know the unique ways we experience this kind of violence, let alone the historical systemic things that have led to older people experiencing it, somewhat, this is maybe not maybe the correct term, but sort of generational or vicarious trauma and minority stress for younger LGBTI people who sort of see those things have happened and still are impacted by those systems. Like, there are so many different factors that we just don't speak about. And I think one of the most key starting points, one of the most important starting points, is to go back to history and think, where have these systems come from? What were the experiences of older members of our community, and how can we sort of start from there to address what's currently happening now?
A lot of it seems to have come from, well, there was institutionalized attitudes that came from society, basically, that enabled people to act on their worst impulses.
Yeah.
Okay, because you're trash. You don't matter, right? So we can just abuse you. And name calling, I'm sorry, but name calling hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when it's repeated over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Or people would actually seek you out and vexate and make trouble for you, simply because, well, it doesn't matter about them. You just felt devalued.
I think if you look at what happened in the 1980s when the AIDS epidemic hit, there'd been a lot of work from the early 70s. Homosexuality was decriminalised as a mental illness in the early 70s. Organisations like CAMP started up. There was a lot of political activity around changing legislation and making, getting society to be more supportive of our communities. When AIDS hit, it really showed how bad and how negative attitudes were towards gay men in particular, who bore the brunt of the AIDS epidemic, because there was that complete lack of response from the medical profession and social services as a whole to supporting men who were dying.
Yeah.
Like, it was only our community that had to stand up and rally round and become activists to actually make a difference at that time. And that really, looking at that now, because we've gone back and been reading some books in the Queer Book Club and looking at some of the historical stuff, the absolute hatred and negativity and abuse that came through, it mirrors what's happening now for the trans community, but the impact that it had, because people were dying. A whole generation of gay men died, or now as older men have lived with HIV all their lives, which has impacted on their health as well.
Or obviously you have survivor guilt.
Yes.
Right? Because, God, all of my friends died, but I'm still here.
Yeah.
It's scary.
And many gay men have talked about how COVID re-traumatised them, because the attitudes and the blaming and the negativity and the death rates that mirrored some of what was happening when the AIDS epidemic hit as well.
Certainly did.
So it sort of feels like, to be very negative, it sort of feels like we make some progress over the top of a negative attitude generally, and as soon as something is able to be turned against us, that negativity of society rears its ugly head against.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's the big problem. We've submerged so much of this. Right? The woke movement has afforded us some sort of shot at equality within society, but it's just submerged the general attitudes. It hasn't changed them. They're just being polite about it.
Yeah.
Okay, and in those moments when there's no one else to witness it, you'll see it.
It comes back.
Yeah.
As we age, for us, this raises that fear of going back. Every older LGBTI person that I know, if you say, how do you feel about going into an aged care facility or having someone come into your home to do your cleaning or help with your shopping, they have such incredible levels of fear, because they fear and suspect, quite rightly in most cases, that they are going to be then victims of homophobia or transphobia from staff, from other residents, from the person who they're paying to come in and clean for them, who's then going to, maybe say things under their breath or maybe treat them much more roughly as they're showering them. And the level of fear is so great that they will actively not engage with a system that's there to support them.
I think that it's really important that whilst we are naming the ways that, the unique ways that our community experiences this kind of violence, we need to also sort of go back and have the conversations and name what it was then as well, to sort of, again, work forward from that. And Kedy, you gave some really important examples of the way that this violence looks like for our community, getting kicked out of homes or going into or some of the stigma when it is sort of in a lesbian marriage and things like that. But we didn't talk about it. It wasn't spoken about. And now we can, but we need to name that's what it was happening back then as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the family and domestic violence sector, which I've been part of for a long time, has done an amazing amount of work in the last 50 years around men's violence to women within the heterosexual context. But those patterns, I mean, I'm guessing, but I would say all three of us grew up with heterosexual parents and grew up in a heterosexual world. So those patterns that we learn about male and female roles, relationships, they're deeply embedded in a heterosexual viewpoint. And we bring that to our lesbian and gay marriages. Yeah. So we come from a deeply embedded heterosexual world. We try and replicate those patterns in our own relationships sometimes. So all those types of abuse are common across for us as well. There's additional ones for us. There's some unique ones for us, like threatening to out somebody is unique for our community. But the pattern of power and control and the language is exactly the same.
Yeah, and so we're speaking a bit about, all of these structural issues like discrimination, criminalization, homophobia, inequities, all of these things that do impact LGBTI people. For somebody who is an older LGBTI person experiencing family domestic violence, how do those structural issues impact somebody who is already going through something so challenging like family domestic violence? Kedy, would you like to share a bit about that?
I mean, I guess certainly for, say, a gay male couple together, and if one person was experiencing violence from his partner, he probably would have severe reservations about calling the police for assistance at that situation. He may at that point go, well, maybe I'll talk to my doctor. If he has a supportive GP, that may be an option for him to ask for advice and maybe to get some medical help if he needs it. But if he doesn't have, if he's at one of these general big practices where you don't see the same doctor from one visit to the next, he may end up face-to-face with a homophobic doctor who then dismisses his concerns that he's raised. He may want to maybe go and try and find some counselling to maybe talk about what's happening in his relationship. He may want to reach out in that way. He's then got to work out where is there a counselling service that's LGBTI friendly, that I'm not going to have to explain my relationship to some stranger before they can maybe give me some advice. Yeah. So those are huge barriers at that point in time. At this point in time, the housing market is so crap at the moment that, if he thinks, well, I'm just going to pack my bags and leave and get another house, that's a huge challenge just in itself, whether he's fearful about whether he's going to get a house rented to them if he is, a gay man, whether they're going to look at his references, maybe ask for a police check, all those sorts of things when you're applying for a rental. So those are all barriers that will be very hard to overcome at that point in time. Yeah. And I think even for an older lesbian at that point in time, she may not have a criminal record. She, may or may not have one that prevents her from going to the police. But the thought of maybe affronting a police station and speaking to a young, and this is going to be ageist, a young police just come out of police school who's probably 22 and tell this young policeman about her 20-year relationship with another woman. she may have a level of internalised homophobia and fear that would make that just one barrier way too hard for her to reach out for that sort of help.
Yeah.
So, we bring our past experiences with us as we age, and sometimes they can even, we think the police are going to behave the same way they did back in the 70s when we interacted with them. Mm-hmm. Police have moved forward, but it's still a lucky dip around which actual police person, officer you interact with around the engagement that you may get. You may get good engagement. WA Police Force marches in the Pride March each year and obviously has an LGBTI component to it. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a particular LGBTI section in the police force that we could go to directly, which would certainly make a big difference to our community. So you're still dependent on the random police person at the local station.
Yeah, and you're quite right. Being dismissed in that way, when you're coming with a legitimate complaint and you're aware of your rights, who are you going to talk to? Now, if you pull away from that person, it's going to cause a problem. You know that if you confront them about it, that's also going to cause a problem. Mm-hmm. You have no recourse to going to the authorities because, again, no one really wants to hear it. And again, you're left hanging.
Are you going to walk away from a 30-year relationship if it's been violent when you're 65 and try and set up home again and live alone? Like, I know living alone may be better, but it's a very hard thing to do.
It's an extremely hard thing to do because you are you become emotionally dependent on that interaction with the other person. And
you're entwined, particularly now that we have marriage rights, you have rights around superannuation, you have property together possibly. Your lives become so entwined that separating them is harder possibly than just living with the violence.
Yeah, and of course there's many different layers to that too. So you've got, if you are HIV positive, for example, that's a huge one. Mm-hmm. And if you do experience domestic violence and you go to the police, they're like, well, what do you want us to do about it?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thanks, mate.
Yeah. That myth that two men are just bashing each up and they're both equally to blame for the fact that there's violence happening.
There's that bias, that societal bias that happens, which I have no idea how to even address that, from an individual's point of view, let alone being part of a movement, I suppose, to try and moderate this sort of behaviour. I don't know. I honestly wouldn't even know where to start.
I remember what it was like, being a teenager, sort of realizing I'm gay, and still, even though the HIV epidemic wasn't necessarily a thing at the time or the height of it, during that time, I was still so aware of what, of HIV, and part of me was sort of terrified going into being sort of sexually active because of history. And I think that, to me, I sort of look at that in the same sort of context of the way that we perceive family, domestic, sexual, intimate partner violence, is that I think a lot of people do forget that this is the history of our community. HIV epidemic was a thing and that led to so many different experiences of people experiencing unique things like family, domestic violence that was not seen of it at the time, and we cannot forget. And I think that people are so quick generally to forget history because history does repeat itself, but we have to talk about it, and we have to recognize the way that these systems are set up that can lead to us not recognizing that what we experience is abuse. Because when I was experiencing my own intimate partner violence, it was probably a reflection of not being able to name it because of all these sort of the way that violence is normalized in gay male contexts, and the impact that alcohol and things like that have on that as well. So not to go too much into that, but I think it's just a matter of, we have to remember where this came from and why it's really hard to recognize.
I think that what I see them as is we have to have some brave conversations. We actually have to sit down as a community in our various little parts of the community, like the lesbians and the gay men and trans and all the different parts of our community, and actually have some conversations. Because one of the things that was so impactful in the heterosexual addressing of domestic violence was when actually women came to refuges and sat down together. Because for all of them individually, they were like, "This, I'm the only person this is happening to.
Yeah.
I'm the one that's got something wrong with them." All of that. And when they sat down in a room of 20 other women with all their own unique experiences, but with all those common factors, when they started to have the conversations, that's when they became empowered. And that's what our community hasn't done. And the step for after that is for the perpetrators then to come and sit down and have those conversations as well, which is a much harder step. And men who use violence in the heterosexual context are still struggling. They're still struggling to bring those men together to have those conversations. But in our community, they are part of our community. If they don't have the conversation too, it's an uneven progress.
It's a human conversation, not a gay and lesbian one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's where, like, when we have these conversations, whilst we're sort of talking about the unique experiences of our community, no matter who you are, everyone knows what it feels like to be on the outside, or to be excluded from something, or to experience some kind of violence, whether physical, verbal, whatever. Everyone, there's just it's an unfortunate reality of being human, is everyone's going to know what that feels like. And that's where, to people listening to this podcast, if maybe you aren't a part of the community, I was encouraged to reflect on how have you experienced any kind of discrimination, okay? Think about how that might look like when we've got all these extra systemic social barriers against LGBTI people who have been socially othered throughout history, and then what that might look like for people who are older, where these conversations may not have been had at the time, or what that looks like now.
I might jump in at this point in time and just say, well, I was extremely homophobic, right? Because I was trying to hide. So the more you try and hide something, the more you have anti. So I didn't form relationships with any gay people at all. I simply stuck to myself. At 18, or 17 actually it was, when the Grim Reaper turned up, I submerged immediately. Right? Even though a couple of years before in Victoria, we'd had our the decriminalisation that had happened. So, and it was like, oh, yeah, okay, we're making progress here, and then bang, straight back into that closet. You held back, simply because of societal attitudes or fear. Most of it's fear, okay? By the time you get I didn't come out until I was 28, right? Which was 8 years into the whole AIDS epidemic. Things had started to calm down a bit. I wasn't losing as many people each year, which was really good. And I actually started forming stable friendships with people, which was great. My first ever boyfriend at 28, I got put into hospital 3 times before I realised that I had to stand up and be counted, right? And I could see the 4th time coming, so I stood up. And I hated every second of it because it felt so unnatural. Now it's easy. The answer's no. Right? If you feel that your voice is not heard, if you feel that you're secondary, you're always giving in to someone, that first gut instinct is, this isn't right. Listen to that gut instinct, right? Because that's telling you straight up, no, you need to get out. Vote with your feet. Right? Don't talk yourself out of it. You've got to make a stand for yourself.
And I think that is really, really good advice. But as we age, that advice to step
becomes
out
more difficult.
Of what might have been your life together for 30 years that might have been abusive, or even as an older person with a new friend or who is starting to be abusive, it's really hard because of that isolation that we start to experience often as we age.
Well, that's the fear factor, isn't it? That you're going to be left alone, and that's the big danger. I prefer to be alone than abused, to be honest.
Absolutely, it's still
Right?
it's still good advice. Yeah. But it is very difficult. It's a very difficult thing to do, and when you don't know where to reach out for help in that situation, I think that becomes very hard. Very
But
hard.
where do you go? I've had doctors who have said, "Yep, get out,"
Really?
simply because I've said, "Well, I'm a homosexual male."
Yeah.
No, go away. Right? And they've literally told me to leave their office, and I'm like, wow, okay. And this was a doctor that I'd been seeing for quite some time.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why we have such fear of the medical profession.
Yeah.
It's just appalling.
Yeah.
Well, any authoritative figure, really. That goes back to mum and dad, and just people abusing you simply because they can.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or they feel they can, or they feel that it's not important. Well, it is.
Yeah.
And the damage that they do is lifelong. It's not something that you just get over.
And what we're sort of touching on now is this, we've been doing it throughout the entire episode now, but, these impacts of stigma and discrimination across the lifespan, and how for so many older LGBTI people, things do still feel a bit unsafe, and there are so many things in place that aren't conducive to positive well-being, whether it be in services or just general community. So I'm keen to hear, maybe I'll start with you, Kedy. As you reflect on your life now, or on sort of the experiences of older LGBTI people, what do you think older LGBTI people need most in terms of connection and safety?
I think they are entitled to actually have access to an aged care system that is inclusive and respectful of older LGBTI people. Currently, we have here in Western Australia, so there's two ways an aged care provider can be accredited in terms of being able, giving a clear message that they are inclusive. So they can either get the rainbow tick, or they can get a lower level of accreditation, which is called the LGBTI specialisation verification framework, which came out of the Royal Commission into aged care. So there's two methods. An organisation can say, we want to send a message to the LGBTI community that we have training in place with our staff, we have policies in place, we are a service that you can come to and know that you are going to be treated with respect and dignity and valued as a human being. We do not have a single aged care provider in Western Australia that has either of those verifications.
Right.
So for me, that tells me that if you're at home and you're thinking about going into an aged care or looking for an aged care provider to send someone to your home to care for you, and you look on the My Age website, you will not find any residential facility that you can safely say, that's the one I want to go and spend my last years and I feel confident I will be well looked after.
Yeah.
There are places that are pretty good, but they are the top of the range for the start. And so unless you have access to really good funding, your choices are incredibly limited to start with. But basically there's nowhere that you can say, I feel safe to go to.
Yeah.
So what we find is many of our older people put off going to the doctor, they put off engaging with the health system until they reach a crisis point. They end up in the ED department. The very kind social worker helps them get into a residential aged care facility over which they have no decision making. And they end up in a place that some of the staff are wonderful, some of the staff are homophobic, transphobic, aggressive. Some of the residents are abusive. And they spend the last years of their life in a situation that is, they shouldn't be in.
Yeah.
So, fundamentally we want the aged care system to actually step up and be more inclusive for our community. But outside of that, our community needs support from other LGBTI organisations to ensure that they stay connected to community as they age, because social isolation has a huge impact on your physical health.
Yeah.
The research says it's something like the same as smoking 10 or 12 cigarettes a day if you are socially isolated. So we actually need proper funding that allows our organisations to make sure that our older members of our community stay connected and stay supported right until their last days.
Yeah. And if I can jump on that as well, I think a part of it is having these services that not only know how to support LGBTI people who experience FDSIPV, that acronym, but how that manifests for older LGBTI people as well. You know, we need to have these resources and services that are going to listen to organizations such as Grey and people such as yourselves to learn about what these experiences are like and sort of and do something different and change their systems and their services to be able to better support.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Mandated training should be. I mean, there was 148 recommendations made out of the Royal Commission into the aged care system.
Mm-hmm.
The LGBTI community put in a lot of submissions. They had roundtables. Not one single one of those 148 recommendations that came out referred to the LGBTI community at all. Mm. So there's still a long way to go to make sure all of our community, as we age, and we are an ageing community, are treated respectfully.
Thinking back to some of your experiences that you've shared today and that you've gone through, you know, what would have been helpful from sort of a system or a service sort of perspective to support you that maybe we can sort of share now that might make things a bit different now?
Anywhere that I could have gone that I felt safe to actually announce the fact that, hello, I'm here, that I felt would be effective against what was happening. Yeah. And all it would have taken is someone to sit down with me and sort of talk it through. But that wasn't available. It wasn't until 2013 that I finally reached out to my doctor, who turned around and said, well, okay, this is how we're going to approach that. And she was very proactive about it. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Okay. So I now have a safety net, so to speak. So I've engaged with social workers, I've engaged with doctor, I've engaged with all sorts of people. And I feel safe within that environment. But that bias that society has is still there, submerged, and it colours how they interact with you. Yeah. And it is demeaning. Yeah. It's very demeaning.
Yeah, that's the joy of connecting to the right person as opposed to the struggle to find the right person all the time.
Yes.
And we're speaking a bit about this already, but I'm curious to hear from both of you, you know, speaking more about the sort of general, broader society, community perspective, you know, what role can that broader community play in reducing isolation and supporting safer relationships among older LGBTI people?
Really, we keep coming back to we are human beings, and all human beings, little ones and big ones, all need to be treated with respect and honoured and valued for who they are. Yeah. That's it at the end of the day, I think.
Yeah, or society needs to be taught to celebrate diversity.
Yeah. Yes,
because seriously, at the end of the day, it's that diversity that makes life move forward.
Yes.
Right? Otherwise, we're stuck in a puddle. Yes. Perhaps maybe they should be looking at it, at how we look at diversity, not as a negative thing, but as a way to actually move forward as a society.
I think to add on that from our perspective is to recognise that we are all going to grow old, and we're very privileged to have long lives now, much longer lives than many generations ago. Yeah. But to start to address ageism as one of the last isms that we haven't really addressed, and to value that we can all continue to give back to society and expect support from society right through until our last days, and not do this discarding of older people just based on an age.
Yeah.
I'm not single-use, disposable, okay?
Yes. Yeah. And I think that connection within our community, for me, is really important. And I think it's quite a powerful thing to remember, as you were touching on, Paul, where, you know, throughout history, our community has only gotten to where we're at now by sticking together. When we are socially othered and we have things like the HIV epidemic and other things that will just try and push us down, put us outside of society, we only get here by banding together. And I think when we think about, you know, discrimination within community when it comes to older LGBTI people, that's something that needs to absolutely be addressed and considered, because when we're speaking about these sort of, that's just speaking about that in the broader discrimination sense, when these really tricky things, conversations need to happen when family, domestic, sexual, intimate partner violence happen, how are those conversations going to happen, and how is action going to be taken to sort of address that when there's disconnect between, within the community.
Yeah.
So I think I say that as somebody who is 30 and will always, I feel really privileged to have this conversation with both of you. Any chance I get to speak to somebody who is older, part of community, hear these stories and experiences, I wish that others would do the same. And I think that more people need to understand that connection within community when it comes to, I guess, intergenerational things is just really, really, really important.
It is very difficult.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed over time, so back in the early 80s, you'd go to a nightclub or whatever, and it would be, we are family. Okay, right? Or you've got to make your own kind of music. They were the theme songs, the anthems that we were using.
I Will Survive.
To actually keep. Yeah, I Will Survive. Yeah. How did I miss that?
Yeah, the big one.
But that actually formed it formed a safe space. It formed a sense of community where you felt like you belonged, and that's why those sorts of places were places where gay men congregated, because
they're important.
That's not the case anymore. I don't understand why that changed, but it has changed, and we've lost something.
And I think that is part of a broader conversation, I guess, around how individualistic society, I think, is becoming.
There is some danger. We are starting to have pockets of our own community turn on other parts of our community as well.
Yeah.
And that's a danger for all of us if we can't be...
They'll use anything that they can.
Yeah.
Ageism, there's that ism again.
Yeah.
Or the colour of your skin, the top, bottom, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, there's just so many things that people can be judgmental about.
Yeah.
But that's not who I am.
Yeah.
You need to look past all of that stuff and see who that person is.
Yeah.
Engage with that.
And reflecting on our entire conversation today, I'm curious to hear from both of you. What's one main thing or a few main things that we would like our listeners and viewers to take away when it comes to the need to better understand the experiences of older LGBT people experiencing this kind of violence?
I would like everyone to learn and educate themselves around what is domestic and family violence, intimate partner violence, sexual violence, elder abuse. So not only can they recognise if it may be occurring in their own relationships, but they can recognise it when it might be occurring in a friend's relationship, and then learn and understand the way that they then might be able to support that friend to make the decision that's right for them. Sometimes leaving is not always the right decision, but at least having someone say to them, I'm seeing something in your relationship and I'm concerned about you. Can we talk about what's happening? I know of a service that might be able to help you, because it's so frequent. If it's not happening in your relationships, whether they're with your partner or with your family, your biological family, it's happening in the relationship of someone that you know and care about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Learn to speak up.
Is it true to say that once that pattern of behaviour has firmly established itself within a relationship, is it going to continue to repeat ad nauseum? Or
I would say, from my experience, within the relationship, once it's established, it will get worse. But if you're asking, will that pattern then repeat if you go into a new relationship? No, not necessarily at all.
No.
But if there's abuse occurring, it will escalate.
Yeah. Okay.
And something that we spoke about in, I believe, the first episode, was this idea for many LGBTI people to put on this front of happy relationships, right? Pride, celebration, all of that. And yes, whilst those things are obviously important, that can't hide the realities of unhealthy relationships and abuse in relationships. And I think when we think about older LGBTI people, there is this element there where we've only been able to get to this point where there is marriage equality, in Australia, and there's so many more rights happening for our community because of the efforts and hard work and just existence of older LGBTI people. So when we think about all of those elements, for somebody who is older experiencing this violence, there might be even more of a hesitancy to speak about it because of all of these things that have happened to lead us to getting the rights and celebration and recognition that we have. So, but we still need to talk about that reality as well, that this violence and these unhealthy relationships do happen. And just because we've come so far and older members of our community have gotten us here, we still need to talk about those other things as well.
Now, the other part of that is, how do you tell your story potentially without identifying the abuser, because our community is so small that has repercussions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is why one of the big reasons why many of us don't talk about our experiences of violence, because people would immediately know who the other person was.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Or don't air your dirty laundry in public, I think was the old expression.
Yeah. And this is where, we're really excited about having these Pride and Respect specialist services as well that are available for community to go and speak about these issues as well.
It's in your best interest to be honest, because again, if you keep putting it in that box and closing the lid, it's going to come back and bite you.
And these services are available, but I think another important aspect of this overall campaign are these exact conversations. We need to break the silence, break the stigma, raise awareness of the experiences of older LGBTI people with this violence. Well, with that, I just want to say a massive thank you to Kedy and to Paul for being here and having these conversations. I always want to be remembering history, hearing these stories, and just sort of, pay my respects to those who have come before me to be able to, we wouldn't be able to be here having this conversation, being on this podcast and talking about these issues if it wasn't, again, for the existence of our older LGBTI members of community and all the hard work and efforts. So just for me personally, just thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Paul.
You're welcome.
If anything in this episode has raised concerns for you, support is available. If you're in immediate danger, call 000. For 24/7 FDV counselling and support, you can contact 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732. LGBTIQA+ specialist FDV support is also available through the Rainbow Sexual, Domestic and Family Violence Helpline on 1-800-497-212. In Western Australia, you can contact the Pride and Respect Specialist FDV Support Service on 0481 080 201. Thanks for listening to another episode of Pride and Respect, a community partnership between Living Proud, Grey, Transfolk WA and WAC, generously funded by the Department of Communities. If this conversation was meaningful to you, please subscribe or share with others. To get more information, leave feedback or access the show notes, visit prideandrespect.org.au.